Missouri Small Estate Affidavit Complete Filing Guide for 2024. So I have some good news for you if you're dealing with a small estate in the state of Missouri. You might be able to avoid probate entirely, or avoid a full probate at least, and that can save you a lot of time and a lot of money. I'm Dan Schnurbusch. I'm a Missouri probate attorney, and today I'm going to show you how to use a small estate affidavit or to work with an attorney to file a small estate affidavit to save you time and money in 2024 and going into 2025. So here's a couple of notes about the qualifying criteria. So how do you qualify to file a small estate in the state of Missouri? Well, one is the estate value after subtracting debts and encumbrances has to be less than $40,000. And so like if you have a mortgage on a piece of real estate, for example, you can subtract the mortgage. If you have a lien against your car, against the car, you can subtract the value of the loan. And another thing is you cannot file this within 30 days of death. So you have to wait a little bit to get started, usually not an issue. And you also have to make sure that you are an heir. You're somebody who's allowed to file. You have to either be a spouse or a child. And if there is no children, maybe a grandchild. And if none of those, then you have to be someone entitled to take from the estate. The main documents that you're going to need are as follows. You're going to need a copy of the death certificate, no question about it. You're going to need a clear inventory of all the property that needs to go through probate. So this is just stuff that's in the deceased person's name and has nowhere else to go. It doesn't have a beneficiary set on it. It doesn't have a joint owner. The only thing that we can do is take it through the probate court. So get a real clear picture of what those assets are. And then we need to get clear documentation to support those assets. So like, let's say you have a piece of real estate. You're going to need to go to the recorder of deeds office in the county where the property is and get a copy of that deed. If you have a vehicle that needs to go through probate, you need to get a copy of the title. If you have a bank account or a brokerage account or a retirement account that needs to go through probate, in those cases, you're going to need to get a statement from that bank or place or wherever it is. Now, the problem that you might run into is they may not talk to you. If you don't have one that is from prior to the death at some point, they may not talk to you and they may not provide it to you. And the only way to get it in that scenario is to file for probate and get a subpoena to compel and order that company to produce a statement to you so that you can satisfy the probate judge that you have everything that you need to verify the validity of the asset and that it actually belongs to the person that you claim it does. This is an area where you may need to seek professional assistance. Sending a subpoena and getting the company to follow through on it and actually produce the records can sometimes be difficult. And in many counties, it's actually required to hire an attorney, even for a small estate. But in other counties, it's not. It really depends on where you live, what state you're in, what county you're in. I can tell you, for example, that in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and the county of St. Louis, Missouri, they don't allow you to file a small estate affidavit without an attorney. But if you go to other counties throughout the state, they will. It really just depends. And you'll have to, if you're not sure, what I would recommend you do is go call up the probate division and call up the clerk and say, hey, am I allowed to file a small estate affidavit without an attorney? And they'll tell you one way or the other. Where do we get these forms? So let's say your county does allow you to file on your own without an attorney. Where can you get the forms? Oftentimes you can find them on your county's website. So for example, if you Google like St. Louis County probate forms or St. Louis City probate forms, and that'll take you to the county's website. And then you'll look around to find their electronic forms where you can download those and fill those out. In your county, you would do the same thing. Another option is, again, call the clerk. The probate clerks are your best friend. They can be very helpful in answering questions. If they have templates that you are able to use in your county, you should be able to just call them and they will be able to point you in the right direction. Okay. What does the filing process look like? Well, once we get this filed, we need to wait a certain amount of time for the judge to respond. Depends on the county wildly how long you're going to have to wait. In some places, it might be as quick as a couple of days. In other places, it might be a couple of months. So it really depends on the workload of that particular county and that particular judge as to how quickly they're going to get to your small estate affidavit and whether or not they will approve it. Once you've filed it and the judge has reviewed it, usually they will do one of two things. They will immediately enter what's called the certificate of clerk, which is basically your badge of approval that says, congratulations, you've checked all the boxes. you are now going to get the certificate and you can take this to the bank or to the record this with the recorder of deeds or wherever you need to take it to collect the assets. Okay, that's option one. The second thing is that the judge or the clerk might issue a checklist or a deficiency notice, usually called one of those two things. What they're doing when they do that is they're saying, hey, you got us most of the stuff, but we need a couple more things. You need to explain this to us. You need to give us this document. You need to, provide us a little more information before we're going to approve that application. So that's the other thing that can happen after you file your application. Filing fees vary from county to county, but generally they're going to be somewhere between $70 and $150 to file for a small estate application in the state of Missouri. Another thing to be aware of, you may or may not need a surety bond, depending on who you are relative to the estate and the value of the estate. Oftentimes, you will be required to purchase a surety bond in order to get the judge to approve your small estate application. This is generally the case when the assets are larger than $15,000, or if there are more than one heir, or if there are creditors out there, there are known creditors. Sometimes a judge will require a surety bond. It's very common in St. Louis County and St. Louis City, for example, but in other counties, it varies quite a bit. Another piece of this is valuing the assets. We need to figure out what they're actually worth. So for real estate in Missouri, generally what you're going to do is you're going to go to the county tax assessor's website for that piece of property, and you're going to look up that piece of property, and you're going to figure out what the appraised value is. Usually that's just a number that the county comes up with as a way of kind of computing what they think you're going to owe in real estate taxes that year. But we're allowed to use that number as the valuation for the property for probate purposes. There are two different numbers. There's the assessor's appraised value, and then there's the other value that's just used for computing taxes, the name of which I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But you need to go for the appraised value. Those are two different numbers. So it's usually the significantly higher number is the number that you need to use for probate. Now, if there's a dispute over the value or some kind of issue, it could become necessary to actually have an appraisal of property done, but it is very uncommon in small estate cases. The other thing to keep in mind are debts. How do you deal with debts in a small estate case? Well, something very important to understand about Missouri debts and creditors, if they want to get paid from a probate estate, is that they have to file a claim in an open, full probate case. A small estate case is not a full probate case. If they don't file a creditor claim and the 1-year time for filing probate elapses or passes, it can be the case that those creditors are no longer able to be paid at all, even if you have filed for a small estate within 1 year. Okay. So this is where it can get tricky. You want to be very careful on how you proceed in these circumstances because it can make a big difference. If you have an IRS creditor who's filing a claim, or if you have Medicaid is often a big one. If the deceased person was on Medicaid, if those creditor claims are filed within time in an open estate, you can end up in a situation where you have to pay the claim. But in many other cases, if a year expires and a full probate estate beyond a small estate has not been opened, in many cases, those creditors are not permitted to be paid at all. So you can, in many cases in Missouri, be very aggressive with creditors. The requirements are pretty dramatic, or the opportunities for avoiding debts and creditors are actually pretty dramatic, which is kind of unusual as state probate systems go. And a lot of it is in untested waters from a legal standpoint, but that is kind of the general rule that we understand with clarity is if a year expires and full probate has not been filed and a creditor's filing a claim, then they're not going to get paid. So something very important to keep in mind. If you're not sure about whether to pay a debt or not, you need to talk to an attorney. So that's the small estate process in a nutshell, folks. You need to go to your county, figure out what the forms are. You need to figure out if the value of the estate is below $40,000 after subtracting debts. You need to make sure you're an heir, that you're actually entitled to file. If you're not an heir and entitled to any of the assets, then you can't file at all. You may need to try under some other method, okay? Once you've got that, you need to collect supporting documentation for all the assets, the bank statements, the deeds, titles, all that stuff. And once you have it all, then you can go ahead and file it with the court and wait for the judge to respond to you, unless you happen to be in a county that doesn't allow self-filing, in which case you probably need to hire an attorney to go through with that process. But that's what the small estate process looks like as we're going into 2024. I encourage 2024 and 2025. I encourage you to check out some of our other videos on other aspects of the probate system in Missouri so that you can come into this being as prepared as possible. See you next time, folks.